What is up, guys? Welcome back to another Geeko Art video. In this video, I'm going to be building an awesome gaming PC inside the brand new Corsair iCUE 5000T. I've got some great hardware to go along with this case that's packed with RGB, great features and an awesome aesthetic. A build perfect for 1440p and 4K gaming, future-proofed for the months and years ahead. Without any further ado, let's dive into the video after a quick ad from today's video sponsor. Corsair's M65 RGB Ultra Wireless builds upon the legendary M65 design with the latest Corsair Slipstream wireless tech and much more. With a 26,000 DPI Corsair Marksman sensor that can be adjusted in DPI steps as small as 1, this mouse means business. Adjustable weight allows you to find your perfect center of gravity, while Omron optical switches deliver hyper-fast and precise responses. Everything you love about the M65 in 2021, now wireless. Check it out at the links in the description below. Typically, when Corsair release a new chassis and they send me a lovely PR email, I request the white version, but I thought today we'd go a bit different. We'd go for a stealthy, all-black system. And for that, we need to pick ourselves up a lovely black motherboard, like this MSI World Record Breaker Z690 Unify. I like how I didn't even mention what CPU we've gone for yet, and I think that's because everyone can guess. The i9-12900K. Until AMD fully released their response in the form of Ryzen 5, 6000, whatever they call it, Intel is going to be the true choice for enthusiasts, and I never thought I'd be saying that just a couple of years ago. The only thing that's really changed with the Intel 12th gen socket is the installation process. They've made it slightly larger in order to give them the physical footprint for all of the extra power provided by 12th gen, and also given it sort of a gullwing design, much like a high-end sports car, whereby you have to fold the socket out first, the arm second, and then our black plastic cover pops off just like with the last generation. Intel CPUs require more pressure than AMD ones, but they don't need to be forced. If you're physically forcing and cracking things, you're obviously doing things just a little bit wrong. When it comes to the new Intel CPUs, you do need to pick up some special memory. The latest and greatest DDR5 standard. Now, while there are some boards out there that support DDR4 memory, something which will save you money on a new Intel build, if you're going for an i9, it just makes sense to go for the higher end DDR5 kits from the outset. Now, to be clear, DDR5 is still in its relative infancy. And what that means is that if you buy it now, you are to an extent an early adopter. The cast latencies are still quite a bit off, and the speed of the memory, the clock speeds, are just not what DDR5 is capable of just yet. That's no bad word against Corsair or any other DRAM manufacturer. These things just take time, as they did with DDR4. We're also going to go ahead and install the M.2 SSD at this stage, moving on to the cooler just a bit later. For the storage in this system, there could be one choice and one choice only. The Samsung 980 Pro. Aside from the Seagate FireCuda 530, this is one of the only drives that gives you consistent 7GB a second read and write across the board. This 1TB capacity is a more affordable option, though to be honest, I'd pick up a 2TB if I were you. You can get it with or without a built-in heatsink. To tell you the truth, we don't really need the heatsink for this build, but it does show off the nice Samsung aesthetic, which is why I've opted to go for this version. It's also hugely dependent on stock and availability where you are. If the heatsink version is actually cheaper or price parity with the regular version, it just makes more sense to go that route. It means you could use it for something like a PS5 later down the line without any issues, something you wouldn't be able to do with a drive that didn't have one. Obviously, the advantage of using the built-in heatsink as opposed to the included heat spreader that you get with your motherboard, which will still work well, is that this is custom fit. It's bespokely designed to work perfectly, making the cooling performance just that little bit more effective. Slide the drive in and then use MSI's fancy little toolless system to catch it into place. No screws required here, and keep your extra heat spreader aside for a later date if you choose to swap out the M.2 SSD. Once this is done, we can move on to the case. Corsair's brand new, oh my goodness, 5000T, which is technically a heavy two-man lift, but I've been working out recently. I'm feeling very confident in my physical abilities, and as such, I'm looking to break my back by lifting this absolute beast on my own. Now, when Corsair sent the email out for this case, I got so excited. With some really great headline features, it certainly helps to warrant the fairly hefty price tag. You get 3 included alloy fans. They're the really fancy dual ring design. A kit of 3 normally costs like $60 to $90, I believe, so pretty expensive on their own. Plus more than 160 integrated RGB LEDs along the top, the front and the bottom panels of the case, making the chassis light up literally like a Christmas tree. It's a shame that it's 4 weeks too late, or 47 weeks too early. Either way, this looks like an incredible case, available in black or white, plenty of tempered glass and enough airflow to keep temperatures cool enough. But Corsair actually have a trick up their sleeve on the airflow front once we open up the box. So what are we waiting for? Honestly, feels huge. I'm really intrigued how much bigger this is than Corsair's own 5000X IQ case. Oh, it's heavy. It's like really quite heavy. Oh my goodness gracious me. Wow. So on the rear panel, I think the door kind of swings out. Oh, it does, and it comes off. There's a screw though keeping it in place for now. You actually get an integrated Corsair Commander RGB controller as well. Worth itself quite a bit of dosh, so loads and loads of added extras. We've then got the same sort of integrated power supply shield adapter so that you can install a radiator at the front and make the aesthetic more clean, or alternatively use this side mount. We saw that in the previous 5000X, so really good to see that. And then a tempered glass side panel that swings out as well. We do need to attack this though with a screwdriver, as there's a screw on the top stopping these from falling off the hinges or kind of coming loose if you were to lift the case upside down for whatever reason. That feels really heavy, that class. And then we can go ahead and do the same on the rear panel. If you're wondering what I'm up to, I always recommend, regardless of the case, you take off as many side panels as possible to begin with. This does include top and front panels too, as it not only allows you to look around your new chassis you've just bought, but also gives you a more clear idea of the build process you want to follow. For example, in this case, I've noticed the RGB controller is on a plate behind the motherboard, which will make it difficult to install the back plate. Of course, you could just unscrew the plate with the thumb screw, but that seems like a lot of hassle when Corsair have kindly cable managed all of our wiring in for us. So I'm going to do that stage out of the case where I wouldn't have normally done so. At the front of the case, I believe as well, we can take off this mesh panel, plenty of airflow through that bad boy. And there you can see, with a dust filter integrated, our 3 120mm Corsair Owls. Beautiful fans, really, really love these. And I think they're going to look awesome through the front of the case. I'm actually going to lay the case down for the moment and come back to that in a second, because first we need to prep the last part of the motherboard, adding in the CPU cooler backplate. Something we've just discovered will be harder to do inside of the chassis. As far as the cooler choice in this build is concerned, there could only really be one viable option. Corsair's brand new IQ Elite LCD, a 360mm all-in-one, 3 RGB fans as standard, and a built-in screen. Really, really love this cooler. It's going to do a great job of keeping the CPU cool and also look awesome. With a high-end case like this and all the included RGB, don't go for a non-Corsair cooler, as it won't tie in with Corsair IQ. If you're going to spend the extra dosh, you may as well go all out and do it properly. At least that's my opinion on the matter. Here are our 3 fans, of course, support for 360mm rads at the front, the top and the side in this case, making it incredibly versatile. Very similar support, of course, to the 5000X and the 5000D. They're all based around the same basic chassis design, which is why that occurs. You want to go ahead and grab yourself the included backplate. That's this here. It's got some 3M sticky tape to hold it into place. More on that in a moment. And then these male-to-male and thumb screw combinations. Comprised of 2 parts, you've got 1 thumb screw, and then you've also got your male-to-male connector with a male thread on each side. We're going to pop the backplate through the 4 holes around the CPU on the rear of the motherboard to start. Use the 3M stick. Cut that out. Take 2, place your motherboard backplate on the rear of the motherboard through the 4 holes around the CPU, and that 3M tape will hold it into place if you need it. And then what we can do is actually go ahead, grab our motherboard and drop it into the case. Normally at this point in the video, we'd be checking the standoffs are all in the right place, but it's an ATX case, an ATX motherboard. I can't envisage anything will be located wrong. So line your motherboard up with the IO shield just poking through at the rectangular cutout at the rear. Fasten the motherboard down with the 9 screw hole locations, 3 at the top, 3 along the middle and 3 across the bottom. And leave your case here because we're going to use this to install the radiator in a moment. In order to do that, we just pull off the top panel. That actually came off really easily, and the really strong I/O on this case, great ports selection, really stays in place and the cover just comes off, which I believe should allow us to actually pop the radiator in around about here. Fits like a dream. Before we install it though, I think I'm going to pop the fans onto the radiator first, then pop the whole radiator assembly in, making our life hopefully that little bit easier. So let's pop the fans on, then screw the radiator in from the top. So we've got fans on the underside of the radiator, pushing the fresh air from the front up and through the rad out of the case. Nice! I'm really liking the look of that and the cohesive black theme of this system. For the next stage, we just need to install the water block itself, and that will round off our cooler in case for now. And to do that, you need to pick up these brackets. These brackets basically slot onto the top and to the bottom of the cooler respectively. They just click into place with a friction mount, nothing overly exceptionally fancy or anything like that, and then in turn allow you to mount the water block on top of the CPU. It really is as easy as that. I'm going to lay the case down flat when I actually add on the thermal paste and the screws that hold it into place, as trying to do it at this angle is a little bit difficult. So lay your case down flat, drop the water block on, and don't forget the thermal paste, something which will create that nice thermal bond between the cooler and of course your CPU. The next component on our hit list is the power supply. Now I've gone ahead and picked up a brand new Corsair RM850. This is an 80 plus gold certified, fully modular, 850 watt power supply with plenty of wattage compared to what is required for this system. Aesthetically, it also works perfectly as well because it is black and it doesn't break the bank either. While the cables that come included are not braided, they are actually sleeved in all black, making them a nice neutral colour force. Though to be honest with you, I am going to pop in some custom cable extensions to this build a bit later to spruce up the aesthetics. In order to help pinpoint which cables you'll need for your system, every PC will need a 24-pin motherboard power cable. That's the one with 24 pins in total, and it plugs up to our power supply just here on the top sort of right-hand side. Apply a bit of pressure, it will click in. These can be quite fiddly, so make sure you get them right. Everyone will also need a dual 6+2 pin PCIe power connector. I think for this build, we actually will need a third as well. And these are the little jobbies that are going to power up our graphics card in just a moment. One goes up here to the top, and then we need to locate the other dual 6+2 for the third 8-pin power cable. And that one will go just to the right of it as well. You'll also need at least one, but potentially two, of these 8-pin CPU power cables. Pretty much all of the new Z690 boards require at least 8+4, if not 8+8 pins. And it's only really cheap B550, B660 boards that will require a single 4 or 8-pin adapter. Especially for these new super powerful i9 CPUs with fairly high TDPs, the more power you can give them, the better. And the last thing you want to do is to see stability issues because your CPU hasn't quite got enough juice. We can then round things off with the final cable of the bunch. This right here is our SATA power connections. While we've got no SATA hard drives or SSDs in this build, they will be used for all the RGB hubs, cables and connections. And my goodness, that's quite a lot of cables on a modular power supply. We've got less than half of what we started with left, showing this PC really can do with all the power it can get. I'm going to screw the power supply into the back of the case, then install the cables in the following order. Motherboard first, followed closely by the CPU, and concluded with the SATA cable. GPU, of course, comes later once we've actually installed the graphics card. Speaking of which, here it is. This right here is the MSI RTX 3080 Supreme. Supreme, the winner, the best 3080 to ever exist, in my humble opinion. Now, you're probably thinking, James, why didn't you go for a 3080 Ti? Or even one of the new rumoured, but indefinitely delayed it seems, 3090 Ti's. Well, those will potentially both be great options, pending 3090 Ti's official launch and performance benchmarks, but it's a case of whatever you can get your hands on. The new refresh 3080 comes with 12 gigs of VRAM, though to be honest with you, the performance differential between this and the new version is once again minimal. Just go ahead and pick up what you can actually buy. I am slightly gutted the graphics card isn't more black, as I think that would work better with the overall colour scheme, but I'm not going to say no to this GPU. It will look awesome in the case. It's still going to look better though than a black card that is too small. If you went for a really short card like a Founders Edition 3070, it's just going to get lost and won't look quite right. Hover the GPU over your top PCIe slot and that shows you which of your PCIe covers That's these bad boys at the rear we need to remove. First, it's the second and third slot, so grab yourself a screwdriver, like this one right here, and remove the thumb screws at the rear. They're probably a bit too tight from the factory to remove with your thumbs, as the name would suggest, and keep hold of them, because we're going to use them to secure the GPU back into place very, very shortly indeed. You probably can get rid of these though, as if you've got a graphics card in your system, you're always going to have those covers removed. Line it up, pop the slot over the other slot, and click it into place. That is looking awesome. We need to pop all of the panels back on though, do some cable management as well. This video won't quite be a full cables and wiring guide, but we have made one of those on the channel, so go and check that video out if you're looking for some more intricate details. Otherwise though, I think we should turn the PC on for the first time and take a look at how good the RGB is in Corsair iCUE. I've also gone ahead and popped in some custom cable extensions and added a sneaky additional Corsair RGB fan at the rear. Check out the cable management on this system as well. I'm really, really proud of this one. But that's enough of me blabbing on. Let's go ahead and hit the power button on the motherboard and turn the PC on for the first time. Fans are spinning. That's always a positive sign. Whoa, we've got RGB. Coolers on. Those aren't spinning. Now they are. That's good. One at the back isn't lit up though. Could this be a bit of a doozy? Have we nearly completed the full suite? We have. Look at that. Oh my goodness. And the RGB as well on the top of this case, on that front panel. It just looks incredible. But there's a problem. Ladies and gents, something just doesn't look quite right. The RAM. Now, I love this Vengeance stuff. It looks great. It's sleek, simple, super low profile. It just doesn't really look all that exciting. I do, however, have a solution in the form of Corsair Dominator Platinum DDR5. I originally had this set aside and being used in another build, but I've scooted on over, stolen the memory, and I'm actually going to pop it in our build today instead. I love the RGB rainbow effect, but I know that the whole point of Corsair iCUE is that you can have a cohesive theme across the entire system. So that's something we're going to try out in a moment when we plug up to a monitor and load into Windows. Before that though, I think we should go ahead and actually turn the system on again with our Corsair Dominator now installed, and then see how good it looks in typical Geekawatt style with an awesome montage. Here we go. Oh, miles better. It gives me anxiety every time though. When I turn it on, the back fan doesn't light up, the top ones don't spin. Wait a few moments. Here we go. Yes, what a result. Full suite, full house, looks incredible. Let's go ahead though now and see how good it looks with all the different RGB effects in the only way we know how here on the Geekawatt channel. Roll that montage. Looking good. The Corsair 5000T might be a slightly expensive beast, but boy does it make for an incredible looking system. It looks great, but is the performance equally as incredible? Well, it's time to find out, because you've reached the gaming benchmark section of today's video. And I'm glad to report, with the numbers on your screen now, the results we achieved are really very good. But don't just take our word for it. We're going to dive into some of the titles on your screen now, game by game, going through the resolutions and frame rates we were able to achieve. And let's start off with a classic, GTA 5, a really good benchmark really to test out a wide range of systems, new and old. At 4K high settings, we got just shy of 150 FPS on average, 147 to be precise. Visually, the game looked amazing at 4K. I would expect nothing less. We also tested out Battlefield 2042 at 4K. And now this might seem like a really weird decision, but bear with me. Here we tested out with DLSS enabled and set to performance mode, essentially replicating the frame rate of a 1440p gaming experience without DLSS, but using AI to upscale and still give us that nice, visually stunning outlook. Here we achieved just shy of 95 frames per second, 93 to be precise, at 4K. Nearly 100 frames per second at 4K high settings. Wow. The story goes on though in Call of Duty Vanguard. Once again, why not? 4K, it looks incredible, this PC. high settings, DLSS on performance mode, we pulled in 126 FPS. 126 frames per second at 4K! My goodness me! It was once again a similar story in Forza Horizon 5, where, surprise, surprise, we also tested in 4K. Now, Forza Horizon 5 is very much a game that is worthwhile at those high resolutions. 4K gave us 83 on average. This is more than enough for a racing game. And don't think you're sacrificing frame rate. Plainly, in a title like this, you just don't need it. A game where frame rate is a little bit more of a priority though is Halo Infinite, where you'll be glad to hear we tested at 1440p high settings. Here we achieved 125 frames per second on average, with 114 and 99 for the 90 and 99th percentiles, showing some very, very consistent frame rates. Next up on the list is Apex Legends, more of an esports title today. Here we tested out at 1440p and 4K, but we'll run with the 1440p numbers. High settings pulled in just shy of 200 frames per second, 194 to be precise. My goodness gracious me, that is ridiculous. We also tested out Fortnite, but here we tested at 1080p competitive frame rates. That's basically when you tune down all the settings to low apart from the render distance, which you set to far. 262 frames per second on average at 1080p comp. My goodness, is that some slightly bonkers frame rate. Finally, to wrap things up, we also tested Call of Duty's Warzone, pulling in 91 frames per second at 4K high, showing this machine is far from a one-trick pony, with a wide variety of titles performing incredibly well at 1440p and 4K. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big old like rating, get subscribed to see more from me. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.